Welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to What's the Point? I'm your host, Bill Ellis, and today's guest is a gentleman with a very diverse approach to life and business. He is a strategist, an author, and a speaker. He's a podcaster. He's a magazine publisher. And for those that like something a little bit more concrete, if you will, he's the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for Pipeliner CRM. And his name is John Golden. John, hi. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, listen, thanks, Bill, for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. So there's so many different buckets that you have your hand in. And I know that it comes down to some commonalities across all of them. So rather than me try to explain that, will you tell us what your primary purpose is and how this diverse grouping of activity, what they have in common?
Yeah. Thanks again, Bill. Obviously, as you said, I'm the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer for Pipeliner CRM, but I have a long background in marketing, sales, and business development. And one of the things when I joined Pipeliner CRM, I actually was doing some consulting with the founder of it way back when, and he asked me to help him come on board and help him launch this in the US, bring it to market. We share a great affinity for education and bringing value to people and helping to elevate. So the podcast and the online magazine Sales Pop and all of that, it's all geared around educating people and bringing good insights and expert insights to people so that they can improve in their career, particularly in sales, because particularly salespeople have been, shall we say, not represented the best in popular culture. They're not thought of in the way that they should be. Their role isn't elevated the way it should be. But if you think about it, at the end of the day, the role of a salesperson is to connect, to help solve problems and to connect people with solutions to those problems. So it's a great and obviously a pivotal role. So part of what we do beyond the CRM, by bringing education, by bringing insights, by helping people, is to really kind of elevate the role of the salesperson and just the whole revenue generation part of the organization in totality.
And that's terrific. I very much agree with your comment about what the purpose of sales and salespeople are, and the fact that is often not embraced by many salespeople. That leads to the less than ideal stereotyping. But it's very clear from speaking with you that you weren't born and raised here in the U.S. And since What's the Point is primarily focused on the human experience, much like your approach, What's the Point is intended to educate and to provide information and perhaps some aha moments to people so that they can figure out their purpose better. But how did you get to where you are from the human perspective? Not your career path, but travels.
Yeah, I think one of the, as you said, like I'm not originally from here. I live in San Diego, but I'm originally from Ireland, and I've been in the US for 27 years. I came here during the .com era in the mid to late 90s. I think Bill, my own journey is the biggest thing has been learning to embrace opportunities and learning to embrace the journey. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, particularly nowadays, because we live in this strange culture where people think they look on social media and they think everybody's an overnight success and people are doing fantastically. And why should I be grinding things out when I could just be a YouTuber and like have millions of followers? I mean, obviously that's the same thing as when I was growing up thinking, maybe I'll play up front for Ireland, when I'm older, or maybe I'll be Morrissey instead of Morrissey. So, but we learn over time to know that the amount of people who reach it to those particular, heights are few and far between and tend to have their own stories. So I think the greatest lesson that I learned, Bill, is embracing the journey and not always to be so fixated on the destination, because sometimes when you're on a journey and you take a path, maybe you take a job opportunity and it doesn't work out the way you expected it to. Maybe it doesn't work out at all. Maybe. So that didn't lead to a destination. That path led to another path, because now you've realized, okay, maybe this isn't where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be somewhere else. This is a stepping stone. Now I got to figure out the next part of my journey. And I think when you embrace the journey as much as the destination, I think that's what changes everything. And I think that's what helped me a lot, was to be able to then just take opportunities and go, okay, I mean, I'll give this a go, and we'll see where it takes me. And it's another stepping stone on the journey. So I think that's it. I think the biggest experience or the biggest lesson I learned was to be open to opportunities. And you kind of can never really make a mistake, because even if you make a choice and it turns out to not be a good one, right? And, not be a good, not have the outcome you expected or whatever, you may learn more lessons from that than you would have if it had turned out to be mediocrely okay.
I couldn't agree more. Most of learning, and I can certainly speak for myself, if not the majority of people, most things we learn are through controversy, mistakes, what some people call failure, which it only is if we don't learn a lesson. So I agree with you 100%. When you talk about being on the journey and having an idea of where you want to go, but being flexible to realizing it may not happen, what are your thoughts? How do you go about identifying the parameters of the journey with a goal in mind, but without fixating on that? Is it core values? How do you help people get clarity on that?
Yeah, I think it is core values, and I think it is not just core values. I think self-awareness is the huge foundation to it. So I think one of the first things that you need to do is go on a journey of kind of self-discovery. I mean, that sounds a little out there, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, all that means is like becoming a little more aware of who you are, what you're good at, how you react in situations. Maybe going back and looking at what are your triggers, what baggage do you carry? When you react in certain situations in a not a great way, why are you doing that? And unfortunately, most of us go through a process like this much later in life, where we finally develop self-awareness. So if I had advice to younger people out there, I would say go on that journey earlier, because it can save you a lot of problems. So I think the first thing is self-awareness, Bill. So you're not starting out on a journey that's never going to lead anywhere, because you're putting yourself in a situation that maybe you're not suited to, maybe it's not the right place for you, maybe you're approaching it in the wrong direction, in the wrong way. So I would say, first of all, self-awareness and making sure that you're going after something that maybe that you've got an aptitude for, that you're capable of, that you're good at. I have in the past had managed people, and one of the hardest conversations, Bill, is when somebody, maybe you're doing a performance review and you're asking somebody, where do you see your career going, or something like that, and they say to you, oh yeah, I want to be the VP of this, and I want to lead. And you're looking at them and you're just thinking, that's not going to be you. That's not really who you are. That's not really what you're good at. And that's such a hard conversation to have with somebody, is when they lack the self-awareness that they're not suited, but they have major skills in other areas that maybe they don't regard as highly as they should. So I think before you start your journey is the self-awareness piece, and then you said the other part was core values. I think that's also part of it too, is that you have to understand at the beginning, like who are you, and what are non-negotiables for you? Is authenticity, is ethics, is honesty, are all those things, is candor, are those things important to you? Therefore, that's going to inform the choices you make, because if you're like me, I tend to be quite candid and I normally say what I mean. That a lot of people like that, but there are people who don't. Yeah. And there are organizations that say, oh, yes, we believe in open and honest communication. And I have found out in the past that there's organizations who've said that, but it hasn't been true, because I've been open and honest in my communication and have found that That's not what that's what people said they wanted, but it wasn't what they actually wanted. So I think you have to understand, as you said, those core values, and so you make sure that you don't put yourself in the wrong situation. Because I look back on my career and through many different corporations and the amount of time and energy wasted on politics in organizations is incredible. And the amount of time of people fixated on other people instead of fixating on themselves and their own journey. It's quite incredible. So yeah, I think you have to have those core values, and you have to make sure that there's an alignment there, so you just don't jump into anything.
I love how you put that. So a few things, if I may. You talked about your experience of corporations that say we want honest and open communication. What popped into my head was back in the day, the Enron experience, where they had all these core values on the wall and weren't following any of them. So we have to be careful when we're dealing to kind of, as a friend of mine always says, look for the thing behind the thing, or move the curtain back, or try to find the legitimate positioning. To that end, I also want to bring back something you mentioned earlier. You used the term non-negotiables. And to me, I recommend and suggest and coach people to make a list of non-negotiables, which is, to me, things that you just will not do, things you do not want to do, things that would be the antithesis of where you're trying to go, and have that list and get familiar with it. Because otherwise, when someone throws a little golden coin, we're prone to jump for that, and then we're going to get into all of that stuff. Is that the same definition you have?
Yeah, I absolutely. You have to have your non-negotiables. You have to have your North Star. You have to know what are the things that you're absolutely, as you said, you're not going to compromise on, because otherwise, if you don't, and they don't have to be like lots of things. They can be pretty simple and straightforward. For a lot of us, is like I want to deal with authentic people. I want to have open and honest conversations. I want us to be honest. I want it to be win-win, but I want everything to be honest and ethical, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not when it looks like, well, everybody else is taking shortcuts, why shouldn't we? No, it's not what I'm prepared to do. But yeah, I think you have to have those, because, and maybe it's something that comes with experience. I don't know, but certainly if you have already identified what they are, and as I said, they don't have to be a massive long list of them, but if a few things, then you're ready for them when they come, as opposed to going, halfway through, maybe you're doing something and halfway through it, you're going like, I don't want to be doing this. Why did I even agree to this in the first place? It's a lot better to say no up front than it is to try and extricate yourself later.
Oh, absolutely. And it ties back, John, to something you said earlier, which is, you've made some mistakes, or you've gone in the wrong place, but you've learned lessons. And that is, as much as anything, the best resource for making a list of non-negotiables.
Yeah.
That didn't work out. Okay, why didn't it work out? Put that on your list. You don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
How do you work around that, or go down a different path? Talk to me a little bit about, there's so much that you do in so many different areas. I might be hopping around a little bit
No,
here,
it's fine.
but I also know you'll stay with me. So let's move into an area that we both share, and that's podcasting. Let us know the name of your podcast, and I think you've had a cajillion guests. Give us some insight, some knowledge on your podcast, and what will people learn when they go to it?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Sales Pop. You can find it on all the podcast platforms. That's Sales Pop with the exclamation point at the end. I find it on YouTube, and then, as I said, all the podcast platforms. We started it in around 2019. We started interviewing people, and because we were starting like the Sales Pop, the kind of magazine, and we thought, rather than us just write a bunch of stuff, as fascinating as we are, it would be better for us to go out and find other people with great insights and stuff. So we decided to do that, to start reaching out to people and bringing people with good insights around, sales, sales leadership, marketing, entrepreneurship, business in general. We even got into things like mental health and stuff, because we have done about 1,600 episodes so far. But the great thing was, Bill, about it was that it turned into it took on a life of its own, because when you start podcasting, right, if you have to start it for the right reasons, number one is you have to believe in it as a medium. You have to want to provide value for the listeners and the watchers and for the guests who come on. But you also have to be, it's back to that realism part. You also have to be realistic about the fact that if you're not a household name, you're not a celebrity or whatever, you're launching your podcast is not going to cause it's not going to, cause great excitement out there in the world, because you're just another podcast from another unknown person. Mm-hmm. So you have to be in it for the right reasons from the get-go. You have to say, okay, I'm going to find good guests. I'm going to produce good content. I'm going to produce stuff of value. And if it helps one or two people, that's fantastic. Then it's all worthwhile. But what you don't need to do is to start off with vanity and looking for vanity metrics all the time about, am I getting enough views, enough people, or whatever? Because that's the wrong metric to look at. Because here's the secret: you won't get any. You won't get it. You won't get metrics to make yourself feel good unless you're prepared to put in the time and to do it consistently over time. And that means that your initial efforts, they may not be very good. You may need time to practice and get better at it. You have to build, just like anything else, you have to build it over time. And eventually, if you're doing things of good quality, you'll build that audience. But you have to be realistic about it. But it gets back to what we said before, Bill. It's about any opportunity, anything you do. You have to ask yourself the why. Why am I doing it in the first place? What's the purpose of it? And what's the outcome of it? And as I said, if you say, well, the purpose of it is to promote myself and to get lots of exposure for me and make myself, famous, probably going to be a long road for you. But if your goal is, I'm going to talk to interesting people, I'm going to learn from them, from the interesting people I talk to, and if I'm learning from them, then I'm producing content that is of value and that hopefully other people are learning from it. And you just give without expecting anything in return, and over time it'll come back to you.
We are in agreement on so many things. First of all, the last thing you said, I believe so much in karma. If you put out good, we don't know where it's coming from, but eventually good comes back to us. I believe that firmly. And the same with if we put out something bad or evil. Eventually it catches up to us. The thing I hear the most about, and I wonder if you hear the same, first of all, the difference between because you've been at it so long and mine. People hear that I'm on my 105th or 10th episode, and people, ooh. And I say, yeah, that's a lot, but you've got nearly 1,600 now. But what I hear the most from people is a question of monetization. Boy, how many people say, how much money do you make doing that? Well, for me, it's a net loss because I didn't do it for income generation. I did it, like you said, for me to learn, to meet interesting people, and to share those people with others that can learn. When I first started this, I made the statement in my opening little pitch that you're going to hear some people that you know of and want to hear. You're going to hear a lot of people that you haven't heard of, but you should. And I think you might fall in that category. So here's a question for you. Building off of the podcast recordings, what's something that you've learned about human nature from all of those episodes that have nothing to do with sales?
Oh, human nature. Yeah, I've learned a lot because I've had so many interesting guests from, from different backgrounds. And one of the things, one of my favorite ones, I'll be honest with you, is a guy called Kevin Cotton, who is, I can't remember where he lives now, but I think could be Singapore, somewhere like that. But he has spent time with the Maasai warriors in Africa, right? He's lived among them and spent time, and he's written about it, etc. And one of the most profound things I ever heard was he said that when he first went out with the Maasai, so the Maasai warriors, and they walk out, and he says, and suddenly they just stop, and they just stand. And he'd say you'll be there and they'll just be standing for long periods of times in complete silence, just standing there. And he said what they're doing is they're observing. They're taking in everything with all of their senses. They're listening, they're looking, they're smelling, they're observing, they're assessing everything. So while it looks like they're just standing there staring at, they're taking the time to understand everything in the environment, to see if there's any changes in the environment or things, for hunting, etc. And I just thought about that in terms of the world we live in today, right? Is how often do you see people standing or even sitting in silence where they're not like this, right? Or filming, or so. I think we've lost the art of being able to live in our world without distraction, or live in our world with intentionality, or stand there with the intent to take in the world around you. And I think that's, and for me, I think that's one of the most important things that you can do. And I think everybody should build it into their daily routine, is some time to yourself where you're not focused on anything in particular, but you're allowing yourself be, and you take away the distractions and all of that. And I think when you do that, I think it sets you apart a little bit in the world we have today, because everybody thinks they're so busy, right? I mean, have you ever heard that one, Bill? Like, I'm busier than I've ever been in my life. And I always say, are you? Are you though? Or are you, in fact, more distracted than you've ever been in your life? Because we have more distractions, because we can. We don't have to spend a second with ourselves, because our little narcissistic friend here will call to you and say, hey, don't think for yourself. Here, look on doom scroll for a bit. It'll be much more entertaining.
For those of you listening and not on the YouTube broadcast, John keeps referring to his his cell phone as the distraction, and I think that's true.
My little narcissistic friend.
Yeah, a little sadistic friend. I love that. I'll use that. Then I'll give you mental credit. I won't say. And I heard that from John every time I use it. Your comment about the guest that you had that lived with the Warriors, and the Warriors stopping and just taking it all in. To me, the very first thing that popped into my head was one word: meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all meditation is. Yep. I think is just stopping, trying to get quiet and sense what's out there.
I would agree with you, Bill, and I think that's a problem with our world today, is that we overcomplicate everything, right? I mean, what you're talking about there is saying, okay, when somebody goes, you need to meditate every day, right? And suddenly even the word meditation, and that takes on people going, well, that's too difficult. I don't know how to do that. And here, I'll sell you a course how to meditate and all that kind of good stuff. But what you said is very profound, because it's literally, if you just stop and forget about everything and just take in your world for a moment, that's meditation. And that's not difficult. That's not hard. Yeah, if you want to kind of sit cross-legged on the floor and whatever for half an hour and block out of it, yeah, that's going to take a little more work. But you can start by literally just taking in your surroundings. Yeah, I know a guy who has who does some work in the movie business. He's a production company. He calls it Rose. It's called Roses Now, because his father used to say to him, every time you see roses, you stop and smell them. Roses now, because take time out of your world to appreciate the things of beauty and the things that are there in your world. So, and that's just a metaphor for stopping. And the same thing again, it's stop and smell the roses. It's just taking a pause in your day to just be with yourself. And as you said, I mean, that can be, that you can call that meditation, call it whatever you want, but it'll set you apart again, because, we're living in this crazy world where, everybody is occupied like 150% of the time.
Even if it's, John, just taking a moment to practice some gratitude.
Yeah.
In particular, again, going back to where we started, your conversation about focusing on the journey. If we're not focusing on what's going on in the journey, we're missing the magic of everything. And if we get there at the end, there's two things. First of all, we're not going to be as fulfilled with what it took us to get there as we could be. And the other thing I would like people to understand is, if your whole goal is to achieve something, understand this: human nature is, as soon as you achieve it, you're going to want to achieve something else.
Yeah.
So you're not going to achieve happiness. Happiness is going to be because you're accepting and understanding what you're going through at the time. Moving on again. What I didn't mention in the introduction is that you are very involved in martial arts. Will you share what you do and how that affects you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I started. I did martial arts when I was younger in Ireland for a while, and then I took a break. But then when my son was born, he's an only child, right? So at 3 years of age, I said, I need to get him into martial arts because, I thought only child, I want to make sure he doesn't get bullied or anything like that, and he's confident, stand up for himself. And within a few weeks, I had rejoined myself. So my son and I have we've done Taekwondo together now for, what age is he, 20, so for 17 years plus. So we're both master level in that. So we do Taekwondo, Hapkido, some weapons, all of that kind of stuff. But what martial arts really has taught me is a couple of things. Is number one is it's a great way of knowing that at the end of the day you're in competition with only one person, and that's yourself, right? Because if you go to martial arts, you'll always find somebody's more flexible, somebody's younger, faster. There'll always be. So if you continue to compare yourself to other people, and this is the metaphor I often use, or an example I often use. If you continue to compare yourself to other people, you'll have a very frustrating time, and you probably won't progress that well. What you need to do is to compete against yourself. You've got to look at yourself and say, am I better than I was last month? Am I better than I was last week? Have I improved? Am I working on improvement? Have these things improved? And get to know what your capabilities are and to learn how to push yourself kind of beyond those. So for me, that's the first thing, is knowing that at the end of the day, the only person you're in competition with is yourself. And when you focus on that and you focus on your own self-improvement and get out of it's good to aspire to something. You say like, I want to aspire to being as good as Bill is at whatever. Maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. That's fine. But not comparison, not always saying like, I'm not where I should be. I'm not where he is or she is or that person is, because I think that's self-defeating. So that's the number one thing. And the second thing is, having done Taekwondo, which is from Korea, and actually I got to visit Korea my son and I got to visit Korea this summer actually, is the philosophy. So, Korean culture and philosophy comes out of a mixture of Buddhism and Confucianism. And the other part is just the humility and humbleness that come. That for me is the most important thing, is that you learn a certain humility and a sense of respect and a sense of earning and just being a good, being a good person, being a good, citizen in your school, in your group, in your dojang, whatever. Being helpful, helping other people, realizing that, your role, and the other part too, which I like, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, Bill, is like, I've seen a lot of people go through their color belts and they get to black belt and then they quit. They think, oh, I'm a black belt, and quit. The reality is your first black belt is you're starting your journey as a student. The color belts are just you learning about things and sort of getting you to that point where you can become that higher level student. And again, talking about journeys. So that's not the going through your color belt to get your black belt. That's a journey. Your black belt's not a destination. It's the start of another journey. Those are the things that I've really, really taken from martial arts is humility. It's competing against yourself, and just setting yourself a higher standard of the type of person that you want to be. Because you want to be respected for being a person who encapsulates everything, not just respected because maybe you could knock somebody out. Because that's not really respect. That's more fear.
That's not really respect. That's more fear.
Yeah.
So several takeaways from what you've just said, John, and thank you for expanding on that, because it does speak to human nature. And so many things come from that. Number one, going through the martial arts the way you have and the way you describe it is helping to shape, form, and build our core values and things that we're going to be committed to. The second thing that I really take from it is how wonderful it must be to have been on that path with your son for 17 plus years as a partnership, learning more about each other through that than you would without that type of dedication and involvement. And I trust that it was a willful participation on your son's part,
Oh
because
yeah,
how often do we see parents, you're going to go play baseball. They just signed for, $50 million. Well, I don't want to. But the final thing is that my takeaway is you talked about comparison, and that brings us all the way back to another earlier comment that you made. The world we live in and comparison, and in particular through social media, where it's trying to compare to others is a dark hole that we can go into, because, like you said, it could be fake, it could be smoke and mirrors, and if it's 100% genuine, that doesn't mean it's attainable anyway.
yeah.
And importantly, the other side of that is not attaining it doesn't mean that we're not worthwhile. It doesn't mean that we don't have value. So that's crazy stuff, but that's a lot for my takeaway from your martial arts involvement. So thank you for that.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add, Bill, is that it also, and I think this is something that we've lost in society, it also, if you do it right, you're a role model. You know that how you behave is impacting other students, children, so if when you're doing martial arts, if you're not exemplifying everything that it should be, then you're doing a disservice, because the kids are watching you, the lower belts are watching you. So you always have to be mindful of the role you're playing, and model appropriate behavior. And I think we've lost that in society, because we see all the time. I mean, we take politics, anything. It's like people like screaming at each other, shouting at each other, and all that on social media, etc. And at the end of the day, Bill, nobody ever changed anybody's mind. Nobody, by screaming at them and telling them they're stupid, right? Nobody ever went, oh, okay, you're right, I am stupid. Yeah, I should take all your opinions as mine. They don't realize at the end of the day, what do is we look at people, we look at how they behave. We look at their life, how they behave. We take it all in, and then we go, that person seems to have their act together. That person seems to be a good person, etc., etc. Maybe I need to learn a little bit more about what makes them tick, how they got there, right? That's something that we will do. And we've lost that in society, that idea of it's not about telling people how they should act. It's about role modeling the best version of yourself.
I've got a very dear friend of mine, John, who is not at all involved in technology. He's more of I'll call it a laborer than anything, but we are in a fellowship that when COVID hit, had to go to Zoom. It took him a while to even accept Zoom, but he used to say, yeah, what people do is more important than what they say. Now he just says very simply, I watched their video, and that's what you just said. People are watching, and we can say whatever we want, put it on social media, but at the end of the day, people can pretty much, if they're open to it, and can see different things. So let's go back to your, I'll call it primary area of focus, and that's sales, because I've got a few, not directly about sales, but some things related to sales. What's a specific moment that your approach to sales or leadership fundamentally shifted your perspective on business relationships?
Oh, it's a good question. I had a couple of them, but one of the ones that I had early on was being, I was supporting a salesperson on a call way back when I was there to demo the product or whatever. We were meeting with a large amount of a buying group. I think there was 5 or 6 people from the company or whatever from the buying group, and the person was a well-experienced salesperson, but they hadn't done their prep work properly, right? And this is what I observed. Number one, they hadn't prepared properly for the meeting, and they brought in examples of work they had done with other customers that were so far removed from the industry of this particular prospect that they were almost insulting, right? Well, not to put too fine a point in it, but they were people who sold rocks, right? As in physical rocks of all shapes and sizes and everything. Big company, really kind of a market leader in what they did. And the salesperson started talking to them about work that they had done with a medical devices company, because this salesperson was very proud of that account. And literally one of the people said, "Yeah, but we sell rocks." And to me, at that moment, the whole meeting just went sideways. Needless to say, we never got the piece of business, none of that. But what that profoundly taught me at the very beginning was, number one, you got to do your prep work, right? But number two is people want a frame of reference. They want to know that there's some connection, that you understand the business they're in, or you understand business, that you've done your homework, you've done your research, that we're having a conversation of peers. I have done my homework and I'm bringing something of value to you, and we're going to have a conversation. Hopefully at the end of this, we're going to come up with a fantastic solution. So for me, Bill, that was the thing I have found ever since that really separates the top performing salespeople from everybody else is prep work. And we go back to non-negotiables. So prep work is non-negotiable. The best ones you'll see, if you get some salespeople and you have your top performer, a mediocre one, and a poor performer, and you say, "Let me have a look at your calendars," right? They'll all probably have sales calls on their calendar, but how many of them will have time blocked off for prep work for those calls? And I guarantee you the top performer does, the mediocre one, perhaps, probably not. Underperformer, definitely not. So for me, again, it goes back to really simple fundamental things like be prepared, do your prep work, go in there, to have enough respect for the person you're going to be speaking to make sure that you're not just going in and trying winging it. So that's what I say today is the first place to look is prep.
Okay. And again, I'm going to tie this back to something you said earlier, which I think is critical. In doing that prep, I know you believe that it's essential to do the prep to find out what value can I bring this person? What am I going to bring to solve their problems? What am I going to help them sleep at night? What keeps them up? And what you said is when you're speaking to a company that literally sells rocks about medical devices, that says, I don't know your business. I don't care about your business, but I sell stuff.
Yeah.
I
and
sell stuff.
I expect you to buy it.
Exactly. Building on that and the whole sales thing, what's one of the most commonly accepted sales, quote unquote, truths that you disagree with?
Oh, well, I mean, I think the major one is because I had the privilege of being CEO of Huthwaite for 5-6 years, which was spin selling, which was Neil Rackham, the spin selling, the best-selling sales book of all time. The only empirical research ever done, where he had gone and actually had a team and did research on top performers. And so what I learned there was that the key thing at the end of the day is to have a track to run on, right? Is to understand what you're going to have a methodology in place that you can follow. But at the end of the day, it's you have to have that track to run on. You have to be able to ask good questions. You have to be able to actively listen. All those things are incredibly important, and that's what you need. You need to have a foundation in order to succeed. And so the getting back to the original question, the myth, if you like, was that salespeople are born. And some people believe that. Oh, so you can't. People are either naturally salespeople or they're not, right? Which is utter nonsense. Because you just like anything else, it's something that you can learn how to do if you do properly. And the fact is that it's not an exclusive one. It's not an exclusive role for gregarious, outgoing people. That's what we always think. Oh, but I can really command the room and all this. Sometimes introverts make the best salespeople. Depends what you're selling. Depends who you're selling to. Depends your approach. And so, there for me, the biggest myth is that salespeople are born, not made. No, you could just like any other. Are lawyers born? I don't think some people aren't born to be born lawyers or whatever. They have to go and actually qualify to become one. They may have an aptitude for it. You may have an aptitude for it, but you're not born, and you can learn it, and you can learn to be, the type of salesperson that suits your personality.
You bring up the legal profession. Speaking of a profession that has some bad stereotypical impressions along, we talked about that for salesmen early on, but that's another one that has that. What's the point? Focuses on the human experience and focuses on purpose and finding purpose. And my belief is that I don't care what your passion is, if you don't have a purpose, passion burns out. So to me, purpose is like the fuel for passion. So I'm going to move back a little bit. How do you define purpose-driven leadership beyond business metrics? Purpose-driven leadership.
I think for me, purpose-driven leadership is, as we talked at the very beginning, is that you have some non-negotiable values, principles, whatever they are, that underpin everything you do. And therefore, you also then you want to lead other people with humility. You want to be authentic. You want to elevate people. You want people to develop. You want other people to go on this journey with you, but for it to be a profound journey for them as well, not just for you. And as we talked about earlier, is that you celebrate the journey. And I think the greatest leaders, the best leaders I've worked under or come into contact with, are ones who are there with their people every step of the journey. And they also recognize that journeys are difficult. There's ups and downs, that, different points of the journey require different types of interventions, whether it's to celebrate something, whether it's to pick the team up when things aren't going well. But for me, purpose-driven leadership is leading with authenticity, is being yourself, having some empathy, And this is something I've noticed a lot, Bill, is be prepared to do the hard things, to make the hard choices, to be the bad guy sometimes, whatever. Because a lot of what you hear is when people start talking about authenticity or purpose-driven leadership, they think some people have defined or almost that as, well, I'm just going to be really open with my feelings. We're going to have a lovely place. I'm going to talk to you all the time. I'm going to be like, oh, Bill, how are you doing today? Oh, all this foo-foo stuff. And it's not at all. And that's not even what people want, Is people want leaders who they can trust, number one, who they can believe in, and who they feel see, hear, and understand them. It's just as simple as that. And for me, that's purpose-driven leadership, is when you have your set of standards, but you also see, hear, and understand those who work for you on teams. You communicate. You make sure you over-communicate with them. You communicate in multiple different ways, because today people consume information in different ways. You can't assume. There's no one-size-fits-all communication style anymore. But for me, that's the most important thing, is that you have a set of core principles, and that you want, and that those are non-negotiable, as we said, and that you actually are invested in the journey, and you're invested in the people around you also experiencing that journey and learning from the journey and growing through the journey.
Thank you. Your definition of purpose-driven leader not being the friend, if you will.
Yeah.
Put me in mind, and again, this is going to date me and probably get lost in a lot of the younger listeners, but several decades ago, when I was still in the world of corporate, we were sent to a several-day-long seminar. The purpose of it was to explain leadership, but what they did, they used the movie 12 O'Clock High, which is an old black and white movie about bomber squadrons, U.S. bomber squadrons during World War II, and how this one squadron was the worst performing, and they couldn't figure it out because the general, whoever it was that led the base, was like, oh, John, we're doing great. And he was Mr. Friendly, and they got rid of him, and they brought in someone who was all business and said, here's what we're going to do, and here's why. And he earned their respect. And then came we really like John. We like John as a person after they found out. So we're getting close to the time that you committed to, and I appreciate that. But I do have a couple more things for you.
Sure.
What's a question that you would have liked me to ask you today that I didn't? Or what's a question that you think interviewers in general should ask that you rarely hear asked? I'm not going to make it easy on you.
No, I was going to say, yeah. You should have just asked me, what's a question you can't think of that you would like to have been asked?
I found it.
Nothing really. I think maybe just maybe pick up again on authenticity because again, what we're saying is like being your true self. I think that's really important. I think that's a really important thing. Unless your true self is a really bad person, then you might want to work on yourself first before you become. You might want to change a wee bit. But for most people, one of my favorite quotes I use all the time, Bill, is from Oscar Wilde, my compatriot, and he says like, "Be yourself, because everyone else is taken." And I think there's something hugely profound in that because there's lots of people are talking about how to be authentic and all of that. It's just like embrace who you are. Go on that journey of self-awareness, and then once you understand who you are, embrace who you are and be that person. And get rid of whatever masks or whatever that you may be using or personas that you may be adopting. Is like find your authentic self and find your authentic voice and use it.
Great answer. Again, you're triggering so many thoughts on me. I need to manage myself. But what you just talked about is take the time to find out who you are authentically, and it's okay if you're not Mr. or Mrs. Perfect.
No,
It's okay. It's okay to be who you are. Not intending to get religious in it, but I go on annually what I call a spiritual retreat. That's led by Jesuit priest. And there was a time many years ago I was saying all the negative stuff about myself that you could possibly think of. And I was in a dark place and behaving accordingly. And the priest reached out and put his hand on my forearm and he said, "Bill, God loves you exactly the way you are." And I went, phew. And then he said, he just doesn't want you to stay that way. So accept who we are. And if you want to improve, and you just touched on this a second ago, if you're not the person you want to be, work on becoming that. Okay, final question. And again, I appreciate your
By the way,
time.
can I just interject one
Oh,
thing?
yes, please
Just
do.
reminded me of it is because I interviewed somebody on this a long time ago, but the Japanese art of kintsugi? And it's really fascinating. It's like where you take a broken vase, right? It's been smashed to pieces. And then they take the broken vase and they put it back together, but maybe using gold leaf. And they don't get rid of the cracks, right? It's obvious they covered the break areas with gold leaf. And for the outcome is that the broken, flawed, the broken thing put back together is more beautiful than the original because the flaws and how you repair your flaws and all of that is actually more beautiful than something being perfect. So it's like the embracing the beauty of our imperfections. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about there is like, we're flawed people, we have lots of things, but we can continue to kind of repair ourselves and make ourselves more beautiful without, by acknowledging the flaws.
Yeah, and scars don't have to be ugly. Scars are indicators of battles engaged and hopefully lessons learned.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, I appreciate very much how you've built the platform of providing value, helping people to be authentic, being purpose-driven, all of that as the common denominator, the foundation for all of these different areas that you focus your attention. So with that in mind, you have an open-ended question here. However you choose to answer it, John, what's the point?
The point at the end of the day is the legacy you leave behind. And I don't mean that in terms of whether you build a great company or whatever but it's really the legacy, the imprint that you have made on other people, particularly the people closest to you. Because to be honest, we live in a world that's so noisy and loud and people screaming and shouting all the time, is that if you take a step back and you are the best, you can be the best version of yourself. You can be the best partner, spouse, whatever. You can be the best parent. You can be good in your community, whatever. You're making a far greater impact on the world than 99% of other people. And certainly you're making a bigger impact on the world than the people who are spending their days pontificating online or sitting at the weekend with the beer telling you how everything is wrong with the world and all of that. They're not making any contribution, right? Or even if you're like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to protest about some big global issue, right? Yeah, it's fine if you want to spend your time doing that. The chances of you making an impact on that are probably close to zero. The bigger impact you can make is on the people around you, and if and the community you live in. And if we all focused on that, think of all the communities building strongly and people, then you have that compounding effect. So that's what I think the point is. I think the point is the legacy you leave and the imprint you make on those closest to you. That's the point.
Brilliant. John Golden, Chief Sales and Marketing Officer, strategist, podcaster, martial arts enthusiast, and basically a gentleman who believes in authenticity, doing the best you can to help the world and people in it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I guarantee the listeners will as well.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate the opportunity and great questions. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise there is value to be gained in every one. Taking a second to rate, review, and share the show helps make us more discoverable and enables others to find out what's the point. If you'd like to learn more about Bill Ellis and his services, please visit his website, billellis.com. See you next time.